on this episode of Jeff Does Vegas.
They just wanted it to go away. Oh, nobody helped us. Nobody would talk to us. They gave up. And I talked to those Compton guys a lot, the Compton sergeant and detective, and they were frustrated because it was solved and Metro didn't want to solve it. And it was almost like they were stubborn and they come out with this stance, and that was, that's our story and we're sticking to it, and they were not going to budge.
Las Vegas. It's more than just a city. It's a feeling. It's that feeling of excitement when you spot the lights of the strip out the airplane window. It's that feeling of awe as you stroll down the boulevard, taking in the sights and sounds. And it's that feeling of satisfaction, knowing that you're in the greatest city in the world. Over 42 million people from around the world share that feeling every year. And I'm one of them. Taking you to the world-famous Vegas Strip and beyond, my name is Jeff, and this is Jeff Does Vegas. It's been almost 3 decades since the world lost one of the most influential and iconic rap artists of all time, Tupac Shakur. On the night of September 7th, 1996, Tupac was shot multiple times while sitting in a car at a stoplight at the corner of Flamingo Road and Koval Lane, just east of the Vegas Strip. He died 6 days later at University Medical Center. The case has remained unsolved for the past 27 years, and the circumstances surrounding the murder have been shrouded in uncertainty and speculation, with multiple theories floating around on who killed Tupac. My guest for this episode of the podcast is here to shed some light on the crime and maybe even peel away a few layers of the mystery. Cathy Scott is the author of the best-selling book, The Killing of Tupac Shakur, Who Did It and Why, which is considered to be one of the best, if not the best, books on the subject of Tupac's murder. At the time of the shooting, Cathy was working as a journalist for the Las Vegas Sun, and she was one of the first people to report Tupac's death. Cathy and I went very in-depth during our conversation about the murder. We covered everything from the timeline of the events of the night of the shooting, to the aftermath and retaliation killings in Compton and Los Angeles, to the bungled police investigation, to recent developments in the case. Please enjoy my conversation with Cathy Scott.
It was a fight night in Las Vegas, Mike Tyson, Bruce Seldon, and so the town was crowded, really, really crowded. And Tupac Shakur was a big rapper in hip-hop. He was with Death Row Records and Suge Knight, who ran Death Row Records. And they were he came in to see the fight and got into a skirmish, and everything changed.
And so let's talk a little bit about how the actual shooting itself was to have unfolded, or was said to have unfolded. It was following the fight at the MGM Grand, and Tupac and his entourage were on their way for a night on the town, correct?
Yeah, after the fight, it was 109 seconds. And Seldon got knocked out by Tyson, and Tupac and Suge and their entourage were all, backup singers basically, were walking from the Grand Garden arena at the MGM Grand Hotel. MGM Grand, it's everything, casino, hotel. And one of Tupac's guys who was with him, Trayvon, sees Orlando Anderson, who was a gangbanger out of South Central LA, sees him leaning against a wall waiting for his friends, because he didn't have a ticket. So he's waiting for his homeboys from South Central LA, and Trayvon recognizes him. There was a bounty on a death row pendant, a great big pendant, great big thing, gold, of a electric chair. And 2 months earlier at a shoe store, someone had ripped the one of the gold necklaces, and it was Trayvon. And he sees Orlando and goes, "Hey, that's Lando from South Central. He stole my necklace." They jumped on top of him, and Tupac and Entourage and Suge Knight started just pouncing on him. And he's a gangbanger, and he goes back and tells everybody, what happened to him, Orlando, and they're all about street justice. That's what their thing is. They don't have any, you did this to me, I do this to you, and retaliation, and went out, and everybody knew Tupac was going to be performing at Club 662, not too far away, and they just went back and forth on the street. And then they happened to see to Club 662, Orlando Anderson in a white Cadillac with his homeboys, and Orlando sees Suge Knight and Tupac in a BMW car, and the sunroof's open, the windows are down, and Tupac's all jacked up and dancing. He's sticking his head out of the sunroof, and they fire at him and shoot him.
The interesting thing about this too was that, this occurred. The initial shooting occurred at Koval and Flamingo. And then from there, it carried on to an entirely different scene altogether.
Well, I was just there with a TV crew down on Koval and Flamingo, literally just a couple of days ago, and also on the strip where the car ended up. So what happened was, it was just bumper to bumper, of course. It was Saturday night in Vegas is crowded enough, but on fight night, it was just crazy. So when the shooting took place, 2 bicycle cops with the Metro Police Department, Las Vegas, happened to be in a car garage right next to the street. And they were on the fourth floor, I think. They had their bikes on the bottom floor, and they heard the shots, and they hustled on down. And instead of one stain and preserving the scene of the crime, they both took off to follow Suge Knight, who Suge wanted to get away from the Cadillac and the shooter. So he pops a U-turn. And because of traffic, he goes down the median. So he goes down the concrete median, which, he was on and off of it. So he got a flat tire. He's messing up his rims. He got to the strip, hung a left, and it's about 2 blocks down as blocks go on the strip. And he got stuck in the middle of the street, kind of kitty corner in the middle of the street. So the police did not secure that first crime scene for 20 minutes. So we'll never know what witnesses, you cannot reconstruct it, what bullet shells were there and weren't, because the Entourage, they returned fire. They were unsuccessful, although they did hit 1 bullet into the Cadillac, but later found out where the Cadillac was, and all of that. They had it fixed. But it was just from beginning to, well, it's almost the end, but all this time, it just has been almost Keystone Cops. Nobody tried to solve it. Nobody wanted to interview anybody, and it just sat dormant until recently.
I want to get to all the different ways that the investigation was bungled by Vegas Metro, because they did, as you say, they really did kind of Keystone Cop it right from the initial moment of the incident. But the aftermath of the shooting of Tupac and the killing of Tupac was almost instantaneous. There were retaliation shootings in Los Angeles and Compton over a multi-day and as you said, even a multi-year period.
It was about 5 days solid, but they got one of the shooters. They not shooters, but one of the guys in the car. They got him right off the bat, and the thing about it is that the Compton police, which Compton Police Department is no longer, but these two gang cops, a sergeant and a detective, were incredible. And they got intelligence from the ground and they were covering the shootings. I mean, they were taking care of business on their part of town in California, in Compton. And they shared it with the Metro Police Department. Orlando Anderson was walking all over, running around Compton and South Central, telling everybody, I capped Tupac. Then when Tupac died, 6 days later, right, when Tupac died, he stopped talking. But they had, so they the Compton police did a roundup in late September, October, a gang roundup, and they told Metro Police, we are going to go to Orlando Anderson's house. He's an active gang member. He lived with his uncle, Cathy D, who was just detained in Las Vegas, and his house searched. In the house was a Glock 45, which Tupac was shot with. And my understanding is there was ammo as well. And as you know, bullets, when they go into a body, they pretty much, especially a Glock and that caliber, it distorts the bullet. So they tried to do, they did ballistics. And my understanding is they sent it to Quantico, to the FBI. If they didn't, they should do it now. But it came back inconclusive. Tests today are far better than they were back then, and forensics tests. But inconclusive doesn't mean that the bullet you have or the shell you have didn't come from that gun. So a detective from the police department was there in Compton. They detained Orlando Anderson. And for the Metro Police Department in Las Vegas, they had a chat. They did not question Orlando about Tupac's murder, and then they left town. It was as if they didn't. My thing is, I kept asking, why? Why does this look so different from other investigations? And I was told from the top, from a captain at the time, that a big trial like that, a bunch of rappers coming in, South Central people coming in, would be bad for tourism. And they honestly thought it would go away. And the less they did, the more the media and the public were interested in it. So it actually became bigger. But until recently, and we're 26 years into it, there's a new sheriff, new homicide unit, which it's been a long time, and he's got hard evidence that Cathy D, who was in the car with Orlando Anderson when he fired the shot, Cathy D got on BET and said, I was in the car. He's calling himself a witness. He's an accessory to a murder. He thought he was telling everybody he was a witness and it was okay to say it. Dude, everybody in that car had the motivation to shoot Tupac. And so he said it on BET, and my understanding is he wrote it somewhere, or he said it somewhere else. That's hard evidence, and that is the new evidence that has come up, and that is why they searched Cathy D's house in Las Vegas, and he is Orlando Anderson's uncle. And apparently he said on the tape as well that he handed Orlando the gun which that makes him more than an accessory to murder. I believe he can get a murder charge for himself because he provided the weapon. I mean, you can't keep people from themselves. You know what I mean? But it's all great stuff. It's about time.
In reading your book, it was fascinating to me the number of ways that, as you say, Metro screwed up the investigation on this. I mean, everything from not securing that initial scene to searching the wrong scene to ignoring the fight at the MGM Grand and the altercation and failing to investigate. It absolutely baffles me that it went as badly as it did.
Yeah, it's if it weren't so sad, it would be comical. But the thing about the Grand, the MGM Grand in that video of Tupac and Suge and the other guys kicking and beating on Orlando, Suge Knight was on probation for something I think it was out of LA. They got him on that. They got him for, you can't go pouncing on somebody when you're on probation. So he for participating in that, Orlando Anderson, who's the shooter, walked away. But the thing about it is Orlando Anderson was interviewed, talked to, and you can see it on the videotape. I'm sure you can go online and see the videotape of the beat down, and then Orlando talking afterward to police. By the way, that videotape was leaked. It wasn't something the police presented to the public. It was leaked. And then after it was leaked, the police, Las Vegas police, didn't know who Orlando was. They didn't even know his name because the security didn't take his name. And then a police officer with Metro talked to him as well. And you can see that in the video. He did not do an incident report. It's just a little incident report. I mean, they do incident reports and they didn't do one. So they had to contact, so Metro had to contact Compton PD gang cops and say, hey, who is this in the video? And they go, that's Little Lando Anderson, who's a gangbanger in Compton, and his uncle is Keefe D, who was a bigwig at the time in the Crips gang, street gang. So it's almost, I mean, you can't make this stuff up.
Something else that came up in the book were just some of the struggles, and investigators did face a lot of struggles on this. I mean, they had an issue with actually getting witnesses or having a lack of willing witnesses, but it almost seemed that a lot of that was they brought it on themselves in the way they approached anybody who could potentially be of any kind of assistance in the case.
Well, when you throw everybody on the ground and then you put them on the curb and tell them not to talk to each other, and you treat them like suspects, they were the victims. They were driving, minding their own business, going to a club and where Tupac was going to perform, and these guys attacked them. And I don't know why they couldn't get that story straight from the scene. I mean, the bike cops who were there at the street saw it, or if they talked to Suge Knight, they would have known that. They also messed up because, you had police on the scene, but Suge Knight pulled with a cop or somebody else on the street, pulled Tupac out of the vehicle. So his door wouldn't open completely. They had to pry it open. The door wouldn't open completely. Tupac had a chest wound, and they pulled him out and put him on the ground. And my thing is, how much damage did they do? More damage to him did they do when they did that? You never touch anybody. You don't move them. And I just wonder if, because chest wound, they could not stop the bleeding. He lost 2 liters of blood, and he never regained consciousness. But it just was, yeah, they, I interviewed the lieutenant, I'd interviewed the sergeant, I'd interviewed the detectives. It was a 3-man team, 2 detectives, 1 sergeant, and the lieutenant oversaw it. And the lieutenant said on TV, he told me, well, they want to cooperate with us. Well, of course they want to cooperate with you because you were antagonistic toward them. It was hostile. You treated them like criminals, and they were victims, and it just. But you can't get that out of them. That's their mantra. That's what they're going to keep saying. But now it's refreshing to see what's going on now. That they're finally doing it the way they should have from the start.
Something else that I found really interesting too with this was the way the police interacted with the media in this story, in that they treated the media in this almost with a combative or confrontational attitude, as opposed to asking for the public's assistance or asking for the media assistance or trying to get the help out. They were butting heads with the media pretty much right from the start on this. They wanted the media to have nothing to do with it.
Yeah, they wanted it to go away, and that isn't how you make it go away. So the interesting thing is, there's no paparazzi in Las Vegas. It's not like Los Angeles where they hang out, and they don't let them do that. Nobody's ever done it. Maybe it's from the mob days, but there's no paparazzi here. So, but you had a lot of reporters, sports reporters, TV people, and magazine people. Rolling Stone was in town to cover the fight, and I met with the Rolling Stone reporter because he couldn't get in to see homicide, so I just drove him there, introduced him to the homicide cop. He called later and left me a message on my recorder and said, "Don't you ever do that to me again. I'm not talking to the national media." And when that sergeant came in one day that first week, and there were 300 messages on his recording, back in the days when we had telephone recorders for messages, he turned off his recorder. And he didn't return calls. So I was reporting like crazy. So reporters from back east and everywhere else, they were calling me to see what was going on. So Kevin Powell, who was with, and Kevin's done books and everything else since, but Kevin Powell was with Rolling Stone. It was a gift I gave him. And he was the only national reporter he came out first in Rolling Stone with the story because nobody else could get any information at all. So the sergeant sat down with him for 30 minutes, but my God, was he ticked off at me for that. But I'm proud of moments like that when, we can kind of circumvent them when they, I love a challenge. You want to shut me down, I'll go up, sideways, under, whatever. I had a lot of sources in the police department and county and city when I was a reporter in Las Vegas. And so I was able to get things. Sometimes they didn't like me very much, but when something happens, it's not a popularity contest. You're reporting the news and they're trying to shut you down from covering it. And it didn't work. It made them, kind of look pitiful, don't you think?
Yeah, it absolutely, as I say, it baffles me that they would think that they would be able to bury a story of this size. I mean, as you said off the top, Tupac Shakur's his career at that time was really starting to skyrocket and really starting to pick up, and rap and hip hop was going very mainstream. I know in that time in the mid to late 90s, I was working in top 40 radio, and we were starting to get a lot of requests and a lot of push to be playing music from Tupac and Notorious B.I.G. and that whole East-West side of things. And I get it. It absolutely amazes me that they thought that they could suppress a story like this. That blows me away.
Yeah, honestly, that first week, and then when he died, I was at the hospital when he died, and it's before everybody had cell phones. I had a radio, that went straight to the news desk. And after I spoke to the doctor and got the confirmation, the other newspaper in town wasn't at the hospital. And so I wrote the story in my notebook, and then I called it in to the radio, filed it, and the Las Vegas Sun had just gotten its website 2 weeks earlier, had gone live with it. The other paper in town didn't have a website yet. I think one TV station had a website, but so we went with the online group and reported it. So we were the first to report that Tupac had died. Within 2 hours, I think, it shut down our website. It got overloaded and our website shut down. But, I'm proud of that moment too. When it's important. It's important to get the news out, and today we can do it so much easier. But that was in the early days of the internet, and so that was 1996. People had internet, but not all the newspapers and TV stations, and so we weren't just up yet. And so it was quite a moment.
Let's talk about the whodunit side of it, because this is a fascinating case, as you say, in that the way the police bungled everything, it almost seemed like off the top. I mean, in the initial moments or the initial period following the shooting, they didn't really have suspects per se, other than the people that they dragged out of the car.
But they weren't suspects. They were they were they were with Suge Knight. Suge was the victim, Tupac the victim, and then the people with them were potential victims because someone's firing out of a car at him. But they treated them like criminals instead of treating them like either bystanders or victims themselves. And from the get-go, they did that. It was lopsided. They were going after the wrong people. And then Suge Knight, he grew up in Compton, and he went to UNLV. He was captain of the police. Captain of the football team, but he still grew up in Compton. He was a gangbanger. He was a pyro. And it was the Crips who shot him. So, of course, the next day, real justice took place that week, on the streets where the Bloods and the Crips, fired. And it was the Bloods who killed, it was one person in the car, and there were, I think, 4 or 5 people shot. A little girl was shot too, which is unfortunate. I mean, they don't, they just go rat-a-tat-tat and fire at houses, and they hit every, there's nothing controlled about that sort of thing. But the gang cops in Compton, practically handed Orlando Anderson to them on a silver platter. And that was the thing that was so unusual. And then Orlando Anderson, lawyered up. And why would you do that unless you were guilty? And then 6 months later, Orlando Anderson got dead in a car-to-car shooting, unrelated, having to do with money that a buddy of his was picking up. And Orlando happened to be in the car with him, and he got killed too. But it's so Orlando's gone. He's not gone. He wasn't, incarcerated because of the shooting of Tupac, but at least he's off the streets, and now with Keefe D, finally one person, everybody in the car that night in the Cadillac from where Orlando Anderson fired, everybody's dead except for Keefe. And Keefe's going to be the only one who goes to jail.
Yeah, these new developments in the case were very interesting to see come up, and it was back in July when the search warrant was executed, and then in August the story was breaking that it seemed like charges were imminent against Keefe D? Do you think that he is going to end up facing charges?
Oh, absolutely. In Clark County, which is Las Vegas, um, it's the grand juries take longer. So my understanding is there is a grand jury. Keefe D is nowhere to be found. So I don't know if he's being detained by the police. They're not saying. They did do that initial news release was just music to everyone's ears because finally, and it also quells all the ridiculous conspiracy theories that were around, just all this, crud. And the fact that that was it. Compton PD tried to get Vegas PD to do it, and finally they are. One of the gang cops from Compton, he was the sergeant. He's dead. He died of cancer, and for me, it's unfortunate he didn't live to see this. But so there is a grand jury convening, so it's easy to do an indictment. After that is you have to come forward with everything. So we do expect an indictment coming down at some point fairly soon. And then he will be charged. And it's going to be interesting to see what the charges on Keefe D are, if they are, I believe, accessory to murder will be it. He provided the gun, and he handed the gun to Orlando by his own words, so that he could have a murder. Probably murder 2 charge on him, murder in the second degree, but it's going to be really interesting to see. And I would imagine Keefe was up for something else recently out of LA, and he was trying to do a queen for a day, where for a day you talk to the prosecutors and they can't charge you with anything you tell them. And he was just making up all kinds of stuff, and they didn't buy it. And he didn't get a queen for a day. He was trying to talk to Metro Police as well, and they wouldn't talk to him. So I think he's going to be singing like a bird, and he's going to want to make a deal. But I don't know what kind of deal he could do because there's nobody else to turn in. Everybody's gone. So unless there's something else going on he can share intelligence with, he's going to go down for a long time. And Nevada prisons are not the best place to be in, state prisons. So I visited inmates in a few of them when I was doing stories, but then they're not the most comfortable places to be.
I mean, other than bungled investigations and confrontations with the media and unwilling witnesses, and it almost seems too like there was a certain level of resentment between Vegas Metro and against the Compton and Los Angeles Police Department, because it seemed like they did a lot of the heavy lifting with this investigation, even though it was not in their jurisdiction. But with all of that aside, I mean, are those the reasons that it's taken this long to get to this point and it's stayed unsolved as long as it has? Or do you think there's another reason behind that?
No, I think they wanted it to go away. And then once they got in that mode, they weren't going to shift. It's like, okay, you've done this now, now continue, investigate the case. But they just wanted it to go away. Oh, nobody helped us. Nobody would talk to us. They gave up. For all these years, they gave up, and it was frustrating. And I talked to those Compton guys a lot. We got together. We got together for dinner a couple of times, and the Compton sergeant and detective, and they were frustrated because it was solved, and Metro didn't want to solve it, and it was almost like they were stubborn, and they come out with this stance, and that was, that's our story, and we're sticking to it, and they were not going to budge. It's embarrassing for the police department, I think, but now, and all those guys are retired now, but now, finally, they're doing something about it. It's the same story it was from the beginning. Keefe D They had him and Orlando in LA with a Glock gun, and that's circumstantial evidence, and they didn't follow up with it. So, the question from the Compton cops at the time to me was, what is going on? They never seen anything like it. You don't try to not solve a murder. You don't sweep everything under the rug. You don't act antagonistic toward reporters who are just trying to do their jobs and get information. And the whole thing stunk. But there wasn't anything nefarious involved. It was apparently just because they didn't want the attention because of a trial, and then they ended up just getting a boatload of attention. Every anniversary, anything that would come up in hip hop, Metro Police would get back on asking them where did the investigation stand. The investigation stood nowhere. I mean, it kind of died that first week. Tupac died. It turned it into a murder, and it just nothing progressed past that. One guy in one of the cars behind Suge Knight's when it was fired upon, and Tupac's Yafafula said that he could ID the shooter, and Yafa ended up getting killed, I think, in October. And I at first thought it was connected. It was in a low-income housing project in Orange, New Jersey, and he was outside sitting down, outside his girlfriend's apartment, sitting down with her when two guys come up and shot him. I don't think the Crips had it in them to go to, I mean, they're not the mob, you know what I mean? They're not sophisticated to go to Orange to shoot him. Apparently it was some financial dispute or something, and that's why. But then, of course, all these conspiracy theories come up when Yafa Fuller was shot. But that really is the last big thing that happened in the case, and nothing has happened since, other than... and now, since Keefe, this is the biggest thing that's happened. And the roundup in Compton was big. And that could have right then been an arrest of Orlando Anderson, take him to trial, and everything would have been over. But they just didn't want to do it. And not for any nefarious reasons. I think they just were sticking to their guns. That's what we came out with. That's what we're staying with. And it just made everybody look inept.
So with the book that you've got out, with all these new developments now that have come out, once things kind of maybe are put to rest, are we going to see a final edition of the book?
Well, I talked to my publisher, and we did do a third edition in 2014. I think it was something going on with Suge Knight, and a lot more has happened. Suge is in prison for murdering a TV producer, because he wouldn't put him in a movie. But we can get into that another time. But Suge Knight and his connection to Biggie Smalls' murder is just, all the evidence points to him ordering it. But the fact that he's incarcerated and for murder, and Keefe D is about to be arrested. Once he is arrested, and if he's convicted, then we'll probably come out with a fourth edition and put this puppy to rest.
Excellent. Well, Cathy, thank you again for taking time to jump on and talk about this case. I just felt that with an anniversary of the murder approaching, and with the story back in the news, I thought it was important to get you on to have the conversation and share the story. And I really appreciate you taking the time to do so.
It's my pleasure. Thank you.
And that wraps up another episode of Jeff Does Vegas. If you've got feedback on this episode of the show, or any other episode for that matter, or you've got suggestions and ideas for topics you'd like me to cover on the podcast, please feel free to reach out to me via Facebook, Twitter, or Instagram at Jeff Does Vegas. Or drop me an email directly at jeff@jeffdoesvegas.com. In the meantime, thank you so much for checking out the show. Be sure to follow us wherever you get your podcasts so you'll know the moment new episodes are available. And don't forget to visit jeffdoesvegas.com for past episodes and show notes. My name is Jeff, and this has been Jeff Does Vegas, a Walker New Media production.